Hi, I'm Dylan,
And I'm Ben.
and we are two great apes, two lifelong friends who've been involved in outdoor education and naturalist studies who have been putting together this podcast to raise questions, generate hypotheses, and just generally play around with thoughts and ideas about the natural world, evolution, and of course, human nature. So, humor, hubris, and hypotheses.
That's right. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you, Ben.
So I heard we had a question from someone to actually address. This is fun.
Yes. So, question from Christine. Uh, Apex predators. How do you? So what is an apex predator? What does that term even mean? Um, how do you go about defining not just an apex predator? What is the this is a question that everyone's always quietly wondering. The middle schooler question: which one's the best, the most apex, the not the alpha predator, the omega predator? How do we define that? And with the little addendum, is it in are we saying like its success rate, the most kills per attempt, or long-term survival, health prospects of the species? So those are our diving off points.
Cool.
So a
Brings cool pictures to minds of lions fighting sharks and whatnot. And yeah.
lions fighting sharks, I you
Hmm.
really can't get around when you mention something as cool as the concept of an apex predator. It I think any really passionate mind or childlike mind, which is the same thing, of course. You want to do that. You want to have your action figures. Okay, Megalodon versus T Rex. Who would win? That
Yeah.
whole question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Maybe you want to, maybe we should preface this with the, the idea that, in terms of Darwinian success, like the survival of the fittest, that he was referring to not this, uh, you know, two two predators enter, one leaves.
yeah,
This battle is actually the survival of that which can adapt to the conditions the best, right?
yeah,
Uh, so apex being always within a certain context. You put a
yeah.
great white shark in the middle of Sahara, it's not the apex predator; it's a flopping animal. So
You put
um,
it, but you put a lion in the middle of the ocean, and it's
exactly,
it's and not much you can do.
yeah, yeah. So there's kind of a frame to start with, and that we're not battling these things, but yeah, let's talk about how would you approach this?
Wow, I
You want to just start with some examples, maybe?
yeah, well, let's start with it's the basic, the scientific definition. So when we're referring to apex predators, it's not just how big or cool something is. It's any species that uh within its own food chain. There's nothing is eating it. So that's the last step in predation. So it's really animals that don't really have any natural predators. Now, whenever something dies, it does get eaten by something else. But like a perfect example of an apex predator would be killer whales. There's nothing that is anywhere nearly predating them. The only thing that's a threat to an adult killer whale is another killer whale. So when they die, they do get eaten, but they're not part of anyone else's uh, everyday menu. No, there's nothing adapted to to prey on them on a regular basis. Um,
Yeah,
okay.
that also means like we'd have to include so killer whales don't act individually. I mean they do, but they
Mm,
don't they hunt in packs.
yeah,
So does that count as animals that hunt in packs? Are we talking about individuals? There's another distinction we have to look at.
that's an important one because there's
Yeah, because packs have a whole different capacity than
I
individuals.
would I think it'll be fair if you have a species that habitually pack hunts, we should consider that as being part of their niche. So there are so that will make it there are species that my wolves are a perfect example, that as a solitary animal, a wolf is not an apex predator. It's very limited to how large prey it can select, and a lone wolf is, very potentially threatened by something bigger than it. So let's say in North America, a lone wolf, a grizzly bear, could reasonably prey on an isolated wolf. That's perfectly within the realm of possibilities. A pack of wolves really aren't being taken on. So that's a yeah. So it's for the sake of the argument, let's define what's the typical what's the like per species, what's the standard unit. Great white sharks, generally the unit is one. With wolves it's 3 to 6, 10, sometimes much more. I guess that would also answer to the question of killer whales.
Bacteria. Shall we even go there?
I think it'll be worth including, because if something is in the microscopic world, if it is preying on whatever it wants and it has no real predators of its own, that would be fair to consider it an apex predator.
I guess in the food webs and stuff, they would actually put that in a category of its own. Yeah, they would be more in the what do they call it?
Let's stick a pin in the microscopic world for that's and also how predation works on the microscopic level is it's stick a pin written. I'll come back.
Sounds good.
So I guess a little history. This first species in the fossil record that's been described as a quote unquote apex predator was during the Cambrian explosion. So for the first 2+ billion years, 3 billion years of life, there was life on Earth. It was mostly single-celled critters, maybe a few small gelatinous multi-celled creatures. There wasn't anything that we would say, hey, that's a recognizable animal. Sponges are animals. They were around for a long time, but it's a thing that moves around and does animal stuff. The first one was an arthropod, very early arthropod, so segmented animal, like insects, spiders, called Anomalocaris, and its name means strange shrimp or anomalous shrimp, and they anomalous shrimp. That sounds like a Silver Age Batman villain. When they first found them, they were only finding bits and pieces. They found they had these long, like grabbery mouth parts, paired mouth parts, and the skeleton or the exoskeleton of that looked kind of like a shrimp. So they said, "Oh, this is shrimp." And they started finding all these other different parts here and there, and they were it would be like finding a human hand and saying, "Oh, that's it'll be like, it's an anomalous starfish." But this was a much larger critter that was the first predator that was known to be an active swimmer. It had little frilly, almost like cuttlefish fins on its side. It had specialized, I love this term, raptorial appendages. So anything that's used for seizing or grabbing, it's called raptorial. So, and it had eyes. It had relatively complex eyes for the time. And it was the first thing that was able to swim, mobily above, first known animal to be swimming above the ocean bottom and, apparently tackling trilobites or small worms, things like that. Life back then wasn't that big. So our apex predators, a few inches, maybe a foot long at the biggest. They weren't, I forget how big the largest one is. I want to say 2 feet or something. It's but it wasn't much bigger than a large freshwater fish. But compared to everything else, it was a killer whale. It was massive compared to a lot of the other life at the time, which is that's one of the benefits of being an apex predators that you have the capacity to grow larger. If nothing else is interfering with you, you can spend so much more of your time hunting.
Yeah.
So apex predators really don't have to run from anything else. So none of that. They can take the most direct route to find a wounded buffalo, or they can choose the best hunting sites. Everything else. So everything that's in between the meso predators, the middle range predators. So let's say African savanna. Let's say if lions are apex, and the meso predators be like leopards. A leopard could get bigger if there weren't lions, but because there are lions, they're limited to their kill options. So sort of that ceiling they start bumping into, where for them to want to evolve to be bigger or nastier, they'd have to start competing with lions for the weakest buffalo. So that was never going to be an option. But once you reach that next stage, once you move out of competition, or not, once you basically get your pick, your choice of what it is they want to prey, which hunting sites you want, which watering holes to drink from, that ceiling of your size kind of goes away. So then it's no longer that limit's removed. So I just say a
Well,
common. Huh?
That's interesting. Actually, it just maybe a little bit of a sidebar, but it reminds me of I've been studying Ian Gilchrist's work a lot on the divided brain,
Yeah.
and the hypothesis that part of the divided brain developed out of the need to simultaneously predate but also be prey, and so we're like splitting our attention between being preyed upon but also getting the right food we want and stuff. So I'm just curious, like in apex predators that don't have to worry about basically being preyed upon,
Yeah.
how does that influence their brain functioning, I wonder? Anyway, just I mean, there's still hazards and dangers,
Yeah.
but because I mean, even a apex predator around here will respond to a human as if they're predator. So I don't know, just a thought. Carry on.
Yeah. Well, that's a so the meso carnivores, the middle ones, I always found there are whenever you so in most ecosystems, when there is an intermediary predator. So let's use lions and leopards as the example. That's kind of like a perfect one. It's basically the same approximate creature, but just that next step up. Um, the mesocarnivores tend to be much more stealthy. So it'll be the coyote to the wolf, or the leopard to the lion. Lions are very stealthy, but as far as like just insane, how the hell that thing do that? When they have an animal that is just as concerned about not being preyed upon or ambushed as it is about not being seen, so they can prey on, they do have to be thinking sort of in both directions. Sort of like with our it's not just what's in front of you. You have to be equally, if not even more so, aware of what's going on behind you. And it's funny. There's an adaptation in most big cats. I'm not certain if lions have this, but certainly leopards and jaguars and tigers have this. Even in these huge, dangerous predators, they have eye spots on the
Right.
backs of their ears.
Yeah.
Because it's to discourage other big predators from running up and pouncing on you. Or it means that these other animals, when they see eyes, what looks like eyes looking at them, there's like that instinct to know, like, no, you don't move, you don't stock up on it, because you're not, are those his eyes? Is his head turned around? I'm not sure. It triggers that response in predators. So, somebody's looking at you, don't move or they'll see you. So that's just humans have used that with tigers, in the river delta in India, with the mangrove swamps, the Sundarbans. There's a huge problem of it's the spot in the world where tigers eat the most people, and one of the responses to that was just people wear masks on the back of their heads, so that the tiger just wouldn't. The tiger would think, oh, are they looking at me? So that's just
It's yeah.
Yeah. So that's tangent, but these are the effects that you still see even in big predators like this big. That's still a part of their thought process. They're part of how they still have danger. So I guess again going back with an apex predator, it's an animal that has the it's an animal that can prey and will have the least amount of concern of being ambushed by another thing that wants to kill it and eat it. So
Yeah.
that's
It would be more
what
like territorial. It'd be like same species conflicts and stuff like that.
yeah. So that's funny. That's a one of the things on the question of apex predators. So we sort of it's a relatively open question. How do you define these terms? Um, Sort of a hypothesis that I'd like to play around with is: are there characteristics, behavioral characteristics, found in apex predators that you rarely see outside of them, and could that be used to predict behavior of, say, extinct animals? Or if you have an apex predator that's harder to study, would you tend to see like great white sharks? They're no longer considered an apex predator because they are preyed upon by killer whales. But as a whole, it's an apexy type pet that
They're in the club.
it's in the club. It's as much of a meso predator as you can before you actually reach apex. So
And
great
if
white
they hunted in packs, by the way, wow,
uh,
a little freaky.
yeah.
So,
So if a common feature in apex predators, like one common feature that I've noticed is uh, all the ones that are coming to mind have relatively extended care of their offspring.
hmm.
So if we think of polar bears, relatively extended care, uh, tigers, lions, they'll both look after the young longer than mortality spreads of the young longer than related species that don't have apex stats, just because there's more room and there's a definite benefit. So for leopards, they don't tend to allow their young to hang around for a few years. Lions will bend that rule all the time. Female lions will stay within their group, or male lions will stay together. Siblings will stay together as bachelor groups. And there are even examples, a few examples of sons lions staying around in the pride or the area. So that just when you it's once you're that big, once nothing's messing with you, I think it's fair to say, hey, I'm not going to have a severe detriment from having my offspring around me. I'm still an apex predator. But if I can impart the protection of being a 1 ton, like a white shark's a 1 ton, murder machine, um, that's evolution. We tend to select that. So mentioning that about white sharks, I'm of the opinion that I think that if any shark has any kind of extended care for its offspring, it would be great whites. Simply because nothing else is going to mess with them. All the drone footage they've been finding, there's been a lot more study in them through drones, has shown they're actually quite social. There are some sharks that spend most of their time together, and they have very clear and repeatable behaviors whenever a large shark encounters a small shark, things like that. And the fact that the white sharks have a relatively small number of young. That's only like 4 or 5 young, something like that, and they're big. The babies are born a few feet long. It's like 3 feet long. It's a huge newborn, and they're almost never seen in the wild. They're very, very rare to be seen. So there's a period of time where I think like the majority of like newborn whites have been actually weren't even newborn. Just, a female was captured and they either removed the young after or just gave birth in the trauma of being cooked. But they're never seen. It's a very rare thing to see a young white, and it makes me. I feel a significant amount of suspicion, like,
Yeah,
it's there's like it. I
sounds like
wouldn't be.
sounds
Huh?
like they're being cared for in some way, like they're actually being hidden or something.
Yeah, it's the nothing really preys on white sharks except other white sharks. So it also makes sense. Same things like with polar bears. The biggest predator of polar bears is other polar bears. The animal that's most likely to kill you is your own species. In fact, that might be another
Hmm.
good thing to add on to apex predatorness. The thing most likely to kill you is your own species.
That's
So that's
good.
probably once you reach that point, like, hey, it's really interspecies competition is the biggest part of your concern. So there's no documented examples of extended parental behavior in sharks. I have a suspicion that there might be something with whites. Even if it's just, I feel it would look like females pick whichever site is probably warmer water or water with less other predators, and it'll probably look like them sticking around and letting the young just get familiar with swimming for a week or so. That kind of thing, especially because sharks already have other species of sharks are known to have fasting periods before they give birth. So, like lemon sharks, has been documented for a while that they completely stop eating before giving birth, and they come into the shallow waters and give birth. So, I'd be willing to bet that white sharks probably have some similar behavior to that, and if it's a predatory species that becomes just less predatory, that will give the offspring space and time to just say, hey, it's safe to hang around mom for the next couple of weeks. She's not going to eat anything, let alone us. So
Yeah,
if it's a big animal that's no threat to you whatsoever, there'll be no reason not to follow this big moving shadow that everything else makes way for,
least from right. And
especially when
then
you're
yeah, I was wondering if there's any evidence, excuse me, evidence of them feeding their young at all, like even if it's just scraps or something, or if it actually kills for them. That'd be interesting. Excuse me.
gosh, this is one of the I can just feel the study coming. The next few years, someone will have some kind of underwater drone that's non-invasive, or have someone will stick a camera on a pregnant. So eventually, someone's going to stick a camera on deep blue. That's that massive white shark that travels to Hawaii and then back to California or something. It's like the biggest white on the planet. Obscenely large, like 3,000 pound, like thicker around than two people can hug white shark. And freaking every other time they see her, I think it's usually seen around Hawaii, she's pregnant. She's just like absolutely massively pregnant. So someone's gonna stick a camera on her. Someone's gonna see a white shark birth, and then they'll probably see. I'm just gonna guess the young hanging around for a certain period of time, maybe just a few days, or simply just getting, yeah, just being around, hanging around long enough, like in her. So maybe it's like swimming in the parents' slipstream, like young whales do, or like pilot fish. So I wouldn't be surprised if we started seeing at least that, if not something more. So
Cool.
that's our tangent on parenting in apex predators.
I like what you said about the interspecies predation, or that kind of threat would be one of the signs of indicators of an apex. Like their only threat is their same species.
Yeah,
And it could be even it could be direct or indirect, even like direct territory, fights or mating fights, but also resource depletion. Like if you're eating the same food
yeah,
and you're going to threaten each other by you know eating up the resources.
yeah.
So
Evolution doesn't care if you die being, eaten by a member of the same species, or if they simply eat the food you're going to eat and you starve to death. Death is death. Not being able to reproduce, that's that's the problem. It doesn't
yeah,
uh it's so that's absolutely going to be the another factor, is if your primary competition is also yourself. That's just going to be another feature of uh apex hood. um let's see.
you started with the first apex creature, the little one.
I was
Do
going
you
to
do
say,
you want to go back and do kind of like some of the evolutionary
Sure, sure.
journey there?
So Anomalocaris, that was the it's generally referred as the first apex predator. I'm going to skip ahead a few 100 million years after the Cambrian. So Devonian, Ordovician, you have I hope I'm not mixing up the eras. You have the first apex fish predators, the placoderm fishes, the armored ancient armored fishes. Picture an elongated body, sort of like a pointed tail tip, sort of like a lungfish or eel or something, or somewhere between like a shark and a lungfish. Except the front third of the half of the body is just a massive armored structure. It's less like a vertebrate, more like a beetle or something. And there are these incredible, I don't know, just kind of like bolt cutter jaws. So the whole jaw, the whole skull is this massive carapace, like endoskeletal carapace with hinges, and there's actually the force, the pivot points really do look like bolt cutters, and it's just this big chitinous blade, like a beak on the front of the mouth, and they for quite a while, for tens of millions of years, were the largest thing that eats meat, and presumably apex predators of their time. I think they went from the dominant predators before then had been, so this is, I guess, Ordovician. The dominant predators before then were like giant ammonites, so invertebrates, or giant sea scorpions, the Eurypterids. So just nightmare fuel, Lovecraftian nightmare fuel. But then, in a few tens of millions of years, these vertebrates with now a very specialized biting mechanism, armored heads, really took over, and they just exploded in size. So again, that's the rapid increase in size in a predator. That's a pretty good indication that if it's not an apex predator when it starts growing, if that's its trajectory, they're gonna tend towards apexhood. Just because if you keep on getting bigger, eventually there's nothing that's going to be bigger than you. And that's usually the most of the time, just getting bigger. That's the most reliable one, the easiest ways to not be preyed on by anything, just because it's hard to kill something bigger than you.
Yeah, yeah.
So then
what was that one called again?
Dunkleosteus.
I'm gonna actually look up a couple of pictures.
Please do, yeah.
Yeah, because we can even share the screen.
Yeah. It's funny. There's been this last summer, a new study came out about the fish, and because it's the rest of the body is all cartilaginous, so they don't really know exactly how long the body was. But there was some disappointment in the paleo community that actually it had a much shorter body. And you're like, oh, that's lame. That's not as cool. It wasn't 50 feet long. It was only 25 feet long. But for me, like the whole question about apex predator, these are human definitions, and they're related to how it all comes down to the little kid question. If I was in the water, could it eat me? Could this thing fit under my bed or in my closet at night? These are all the questions. And for me, a 3 foot wide armored head with shearing bolt cutter jaws in a shorter body, like, oh, well, that means it can fit into a smaller space. It's even harder for me to outswim this thing. That's even worse. Oh goodness, that's awful.
Did you say it was Dunkleosteus?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh wow, yeah, those are nuts.
Yeah, it's awful. Like, oh no.
That's not fun.
Yeah, it's like a cross between a snapping turtle and a megalodon.
Yeah,
it's really awful. Or if you took the skeleton of like a largemouth bass or something and just put a snapping turtle skin on that with the whole mouth unfolding and this, yeah, and designed to eat armored things, so very well adapted skeletal creatures. which means like, yeah, but the bite force on that thing would have been ridiculous.
This
Ridiculous.
this description says a a fish built like a bulldozer and a guillotine for jaws. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Creepy.
a
See if I can share. Should I share this? Do you want to share screen? Try that. We haven't
do
done
it,
that.
do it
That might be a
first.
useful
The
thing
two
to
great apes
practice.
first.
Yes. Sharing.
Well,
There it is.
on.
Yeah.
Ah. Oh no! You see, that's the short one on the
Was
top.
that the short one?
The one that you were just on. That's the now shorter, the stockier one, like top center. Oh, it's stocky. It's shaped like a goldfish. Doesn't change how big its head is. Doesn't change at all whether it could actually just eat you in two bites. And the answer is yes, absolutely, it could eat you in two bites.
Yeah. Look at
And
this little size comparison. Yeah.
yeah, it's oh gosh, it's awful. It's yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
I
Fun.
see you, Osseous. I see you. Um, sorry you're extinct. Glad I don't have to deal with you. That's on the check that off our list.
No kidding.
Noted. Safe from Dunkleosteus. Thank you, extinction. Moving along. Other apex predators. Let's step out of the ocean. So let's venture forward to the Carboniferous, so that the age of coal forests. So life has started moving on land. There are land plants. There are plants that we would reasonably describe as trees or being tree-like, and there were definite forests. Uh, Oxygen was off the hook. There's a lot more oxygen, so arthropods had a chance for a brief period to kind of be to run the show for a while. I really hope I'm not mixing up my eras, but so yeah, Carboniferous. The largest flying insect ever to live was alive then. Those are the giant dragonflies.
Pretty
And they're
cool.
not strictly speaking, not exactly dragonflies. They're close dragonfly relatives, but regardless, same basic thing. I believe nymphs of them have also been discovered. That's oh gosh, I never even thought about that. Oh, no, I'll go to that. But basically, it's effectively a dragonfly with a wingspan like a mallard. So huge, like 2 foot plus 3 foot wingspan. Massive insect. Huge eyes. Nothing else was flying at that time. So it was not
Really?
just the large. Yeah, there were no
Wait.
pterosaurs.
So were there things flying previous to that?
Oh, there were other insects.
Okay.
Other
I was gonna
insects,
say
but at the time, oh yeah,
because
nothing else, no other sorry, insects were flying. No vertebrates were flying. There was nothing else at the time that was flying.
yeah.
It was the only insects were the only flying
Okay.
thing. It was the apex predator truly of that niche. It wasn't the biggest animal,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
an animal that weighs whatever a pound was the apex predator in this niche because there was nothing else in the skies. So
Huh.
um yeah, it was definitely a dragon fly. It's right.
Yeah.
It was a
Yeah.
dragon. Nothing else was had any meaningful way um to prey on this critter. And the scary thing I just realized, I never thought about this, but if it was a dragonfly, basically dragonfly, that mean, and it was its body was this long, that means there was a dragonfly nymph with a body that freaking long,
Yeah.
and that's just an awful icky feeling. I never thought like the big dragonfly. I think like, oh, get away, big dragonfly, shoo, whack, scared away with a broom, right?
Yeah.
That sounds doable. That sounds feasible. I don't like picking up a large dragonfly nymph now, and there's only a few inches long. Imagine swimming with
Right.
those things.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh gosh.
Uh,
Oh no. Oh, that's awful.
that's funny.
You're doing it, so it's just like the pine barrens, like the cedar swamps, where there's a big log jam and rivers flowing through that. That's what it was like. That's what the coal forests were like.
Yeah.
So imagine doing a swamp crawl through
Yeah.
white cedars or through a cypress swamp, and then this thing just like skitters past you or sees your fingers and think it's the worm.
Yeah.
or I don't know what.
Yeah.
That's yeah.
Yeah.
And there
That's
wouldn't
a
just be one. There wouldn't just be one of them. There'd be
no. There'd
multiple.
be many of them. Yeah.
Oh gosh. Mm-mm. No. Uh. So that's just a another example of apex hood and just the general the general awfulness,
Dominance. Yeah. Yeah.
dominance, utter dominance. Um. The age of the giant land arthropods went away with the end of the Carboniferous. As the Carboniferous ended, it was the Permian. That was right after. I always so with the earlier eras, I so often mix. Oh, no, there's a 50 million year period between those two.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
believe I believe it was the Permian that immediately followed the Carboniferous, but there might be to the geology folks out there. I apologize if I'm forgetting like there's the such and such is here, but I believe it was the Permian. Permian saw the real begin. So, irregardless, skipping ahead to the Permian because that's the I know. Then you started seeing significantly larger land vertebrates, big predatory land vertebrates. That was the real. That's when we really start seeing the land ecosystems being generally the kinds of food webs we see were generally more similar to what we see nowadays. Larger vertebrates. We saw the first vertebrate herbivores or mega herbivores. Large, plodding tank-like creatures. Which I guess that's another feature when you have an ecosystem. Once you have big enough predators, you'll start seeing tanks evolving. So you'll see some kind of big armored, shelled, slow-moving herbivorous
Resist the
things.
predators. Yeah.
That's an ecological symptom of the presence of large predators. Of big, like there's a predator that can eat just about anything.
Right.
So in the Permian, that would have been like Scutosaurus, a couple other large diapsis reptiles that just were, heavily armored, stocky, sort of built not to be tipped over. That's one of the things you see with tanks. Part of the deal is like, don't show them your belly.
Yeah. Is that so?
In,
You mentioned a bit ago, maybe off camera, but the idea of apex herbivores. Would that
yeah.
be would that be those guys?
Yeah. So the term, so apex predator is that's a proper term. Apex herbivore is more of a colloquial term, but I like it, so I want to bring this more use of an
Yeah.
herbivore that is no longer being regularly preyed upon. So it's like, yes, anything you get preyed upon. So baby polar bears get killed by adult males, but not, it's not, that's sort of the exception. Once you're an adult, you're not getting preyed on. Apex herbivores would be, this is an herbivore. It's not preying on anything, but it's stepped out of, it's no longer, being preyed upon is not its biggest concern. It can kind of tune out that, in the background until it gets very old or, very injured. So elephants, they their concern really isn't lions as much as other elephants. So that would be the thing. An apex herbivore would be an herbivore that its greatest competition, its greatest threat would be other members of its own species. What's most likely to kill a hippo? Another hippo. Hippos do get preyed upon, but that's so. Let's expanded it into that definition.
That's cool.
And so I guess that's another thing. So I was talking about what are trying to generate hypotheses. What are characteristics common to apex predator that just by being in that role, you have a chance to have behaviors you wouldn't see otherwise. I guess the same question would be for herbivores. What are behaviors that you would expect to see in an apex herbivore, and what could we then reasonably infer that are behaviors that haven't been documented in modern apex herbivore species and we should maybe look for, or what are behaviors we would expect to see in extinct apex herbivores? So, there's a lot of fair assumptions. Let's pick Triceratops. Let's pick a big herbivore from a long time ago. Adults, so they were that was one of the apex herbivores that was evolved to face the quintessential apex predator, the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Or I should say, there's a fun side note. They've now divided the Tyrannosaur genus into 3 subspecies. So there's Rex. There's also Tyrannosaurus imperator, and my favorite Tyrannosaurus regina, which is queen. So tyrant lizard queen. I think they did actually give that subspecies to the Sioux specimen as the largest, or one of the largest Tyrannosaurs ever discovered. She was the largest for at least a decade plus. But anyway, Tyrannosaurs in general. Triceratops was on the menu, but it was a tank. It was adapted to deal with that kind of predatory hassle. So I think it'll be fair to make assumptions about its behavior, assuming, hey, it's an aggressive tank. So all modern aggressive tanky herbivores, we call them the apex herbivores, elephants, hippos, rhinoceroses, Cape buffalo, they all have a common feature of aggression. None of those are gentle giants. They're all animals that are highly aggressive, even aggressive things that they aren't even sure to predators. So you would tend to see, I think it would be fair to assume that with Triceratops, if a Triceratops were walking around today, so let's say we're in South Florida and we're walking to the palm scrub and we see a Triceratops, I think it would be fair to assume it wouldn't just ignore you or tune you out. It would probably be very territorial of its space. It would probably have some kind of elaborate threat posture. Sometimes it probably was capable of making a very loud sound just to warn other critters off. I think it's safe to assume it would, if you got too close or you startled one, it'll probably be very bothered by that, and will probably have some kind of aggressive response, a charge or trying to trample you or something like that, simply because every single modern tank does that. And these are also elephants, rhinoceroses, Cape buffalo, hippos. They're all separated by like 70, 80 million years of evolution. So they're wildly differently related to each other.
Yeah.
So this is a game of convergent evolution, the same trait appearing again and again for the same situation. So it seems a very safe assumption that any of the large, tanky looking herbivores of any period would have had a certain level of herbivore aggression. Sort of like, whoa, this thing is really angry. Why is it so angry? Because it needs to have that reputation in its ecosystem. It needs to have, every time a predator interacts with it, you want the predator to associate the way you sound, the sight of you, how you smell. You want them to associate this with a bad time. This is oh no, here's a rhinoceros again. I don't want to have to deal with this. There's nothing to be gained from this. So again, going all the way back in conversation to the Permian, the first tanks, there's a decent chance there was some kind of aggressive tanky behavior. I guess the one exception is if you have a really heavily armored tanky animal like turtles. Some of them the defense is entirely defensive. It's no offensive behavior. But actually, that should, I don't know if I should even count that, because the largest turtles are all relatively aggressive. So not counting, giant tortoises live on islands, don't have any predators, but the largest freshwater turtles are either soft-shelled turtles, which you have a very strong bite. Most of their focus is on hiding, or you're talking snapping turtles or alligator snapping turtles. These are big, aggressive, armored predators. So yeah, that's proving the point again. And all of the big armored, tanky land herbivores, The things with an actual shell, most of them throughout history have had some kind of club tail. So you have your ankylosaurs and the Cretaceous. Recently saw, in fact, I was able to see. I've been to a couple museums with dinosaurs in the last few weeks,
Oh,
and
cool.
in two separate museums, I got to see the tail club of a Euoplocephalus. It's like the biggest, the most oversized ankylosaur. So these are again adapted to deal with T Rexes. So it's an herbivore that has armor on its eyelids to give you an idea how armored this thing is.
How do you
And
spell
the
it?
tail club, what's that?
How do you spell the name?
Euoplocephalus. If you, I'm sure you could.
Yeah,
It's cephalus as in head.
there we go. I think so.
Yeah,
It's not the spiky club, the
round.
round club. Yeah, got it.
Yeah. So it's hard to tell in a picture. The club is this big around. It's a massive, huge, like a 50-pound ball of bone. Yeah, that thing. Horrifying. And that's just the bone, not counting whatever kind of horny outgrowth that would have been on this thing. So every reasonable inch of this thing is armored. That tail is connected to massive muscles in its hind legs. So it's much of its body, half of its body is built around the necessity of how can I swing this 50-pound sledgehammer as
Yeah,
fast as I possibly can. So picture this thing
whip.
weighs, yeah. So picture a hippopotamus or like an Indian rhino with half of its body adapted just to swing that kind of a club. Um, so that's a tank. There you go. Perfect picture. Perfect illustration. That's a tank. That's a quintessential tank moment. It's nothing wants to deal with that. So again,
Yeah,
once you that's the thing with an herbivore, it's growing bigger is a good way to avoid predators. You get too big, they just can't bring you down. After a certain point, it's like, oh, they're always going to be able to find me. I'm not that inconspicuous on the landscape. So how do I deal with that? So that just having hyperaggression is probably a behavior you can reasonably predict amongst large, really large herbivores, um, which would affect the behavior of apex predator. That's another thing. Usually, most ecosystems, I'm not thinking of any examples of exceptions. If there's an apex herbivore, if something is going to kill it, it's usually going to be an apex predator. You don't see as many. I can't think of any exceptions to that rule again because the apex predator is going to tend to be the largest thing out there. So that's another trait you would tend to see repeated in apex predators, is if it's big enough to potentially deal with or interact with apex herbivores, apex prey species, they would have to also have built into their understanding of how they approach prey is that, oh, this thing is adapted to not be eaten by me. This thing is adapted to aggressively. It's not going to outrun me. It's going to fight me. And just if it even sees me, it's going to do something aggressive. A mountain lion interacts with a white-tailed deer. A white-tailed deer in close range is a dangerous animal to deal with. They kick, they'll horn, they'll bite. They don't die easy, but they're more adapted for running away. A tiger trying to go after an Indian wild cat cattle, the gaur, right? That's the largest water buffalo. It's the largest member of the cattle family. It's a 1.5 2-ton like big monster tank water buffalo. Really, really massive, like 7 feet at the shoulders, absurdly massive cow. That's an animal that is it's not going to try and outrun a tiger. It's going to stand its ground and it's going to let the tiger know this isn't worth it. This is
right.
it's not a hassle. So any of the I guess if we think of hunting behaviors like like football plays, right? Like the defensive or offensive plays, you're gonna see different kinds of plays repeating up, again and again, or different kinds of tactics repeating again and again for handling heavily armored prey or heavily aggressive prey. So that's another feature you probably see throughout history in apex predators. Let's see. Did we come to some kind of a point there?
Well, let's see. You have you were kind of talking about how you might be able to determine apexness by the I'm kind of getting like by the resistance to apexness, like the animal that's built to withstand. So no, you're seeing the morphology of an apex predator by looking at the prey.
Yeah.
Is that a thing?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Good. Thank you. And are there any common features, behavioral features, or physical adaptations that you tend to see in modern apex predators that you could expect to see in extinct species? Or are there behaviors common to apex predators that haven't been documented in some apex species that you expect, hey, naturalists out there, folks writing theses, maybe take a look at, I don't know, maybe look for behaviors in Nile crocodiles that have been documented in other apex predators that no one's thought to look for in Nile crocodiles, say.
Right.
So, like, what is their, now I'm sure someone's done a study, what does the interspecies cannibalism look like in Nile crocodiles? And are there any patterns or any ratios you tend to find with them that you wouldn't see in other smaller crocodilians, ones that aren't running the ecosystem?
Hey, I'm glad you brought up crocodilians. I gotta say, what is going on with them? Are they dinosaurs? I mean, come on.
I think
have they changed much in the last?
Any naturalist who doesn't just say, look, there's no, like, dragon is not a proper scientific term, but it's a dragon. Come on. It's a bad faith argument at best. I would say it's bordering on malicious ignorance to say, oh, that's not a dragon. It's a dragon. It lives in the water. It's armored. It kills whatever it wants. It doesn't breathe fire. Who cares?
Yeah.
Like, thank God it doesn't breathe fire. Otherwise, we'd still be hiding in trees. It's a niche that's been around for a very long time, and it works because everything needs to drink at some point or another, and when you drink, you have to put your face right in front of this thing's mouth. So there's not many animals that can rely, like predators, that, hey, when you attack an animal, what do you attack? Well, I prefer to go right at the face and then I drown it. That's awful. That's just so awful, and it works so well. It's such a such a good trick, just being there in the water,
especially muddy watering holes.
Muddy water. If there's muddy water, it's so easy to hide.
So easy.
It's just like the best camouflage ever.
Yeah.
It just has to be, and its whole hunting style based around being extremely patient and then having a few seconds of extreme intense violence.
Yeah.
That works. That just time and again it works. And
yeah.
It also means that they have a relatively slow metabolism, which also means, look, you don't have to get every single animal you go for. I guess this is going back to the original question: are we defining success as kill ratio, kill per attempt, or just general survivability? They don't have the best kill ratio. Compared to some mammals, they're actually a relatively clumsy killer. But who cares? Because everything has to keep on going back to the water, and it's in video gaming they call it resource camping. So, like, in a multiplayer first person shooter, there's like a respawn space where when your character dies, they're reborn in this new spot, and the crocodile is the one that can just sit there and wait, aiming like, oh, he just respawned, bam, right?
Right.
A regenerating, like some like little health pack or something that you can heal your character with. If you just sit there, and in most video games, that's lame, that's cheating, it's not fun. Like, well, yeah, but it works.
It's
It's really
efficient.
it's cheesy, but it works. And that's been Crocodilians. That's been their game for a long time, and it works. Funny thing about them, uh, every time there's a major like every time there's like a major extinction event, and oh no, there's no more land predators. Some crocodilian will say, "Hey, there's no land predators," and they'll just evolve hooves and become running crocodiles, sprinting crocodiles for like 5 million
No
years,
way.
and then they'll stop. It's happened again and again throughout history. Like
Sprinting hooved crocodiles?
yeah, isn't that awful? Isn't that
Like,
so
do they
awful?
get
So
longer legs?
they get longer legs. Oh gosh. Again, this is worth looking up. Oh, I'm trying to remember the species. Oh, there was one in Australia like 30 million years ago, and there was one in uh right after the dinosaurs went extinct, like 5 million years after. There was also I'm forgetting their names. I'm sure if we Googled land crocodiles or sprinting crocodiles, we'll find so it'll be
Ah, I
something
just,
Thucus.
yeah, I think I found something weird. Uh, Galloping dinosaur eating crocodiles?
Yep.
Long-legged crocodiles. Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the only reason why modern crocodiles, are so slow on land is because they're very well adapted to swim in the water. That's their whole thing. Their limbs are on the side for steering and more aerodynamic, hydrodynamic state. Yeah, isn't that awful?
Yeah.
Isn't that just awful? So uh, this has happened again and again. Uh, every chance, oh no, the land predators are gone, and then their legs go directly underneath them, and it's not that hard for them to start running stuff down.
Wow.
So yes, apex predator, and the
Look at
biggest this
there's a one
alligator.
nowadays got pretty
Yep.
long legs. I mean,
So
that's
that's what they when they're on land, they
yeah,
put their legs directly underneath their body, and
just
that's
swivel.
it.
Wow.
Yeah, that's they so even an animal, this is an animal, it's like it's almost like a seal, it's not adapted to be very good moving on land. That's a seal is extreme, but I can't think like an otter, right? It's like, not as well adapted on land, much more nimble in the water, but still a crocodile is still a problem on land. But imagine a crocodile that's can definitely run faster than you.
Oh,
It's
geez.
it's a nightmare, and it doesn't have to eat as much. So let's say again, let's go back 55 million years ago, 60 million years ago, wherever on Earth, and it's not just this predator weighs 1,000, 1,500 pounds. Its population density is going to be that of a cold-blooded predator, not a warm-blooded predator. So there's going to be 10 times as many of these things on a given landscape because they eat a tenth of the amount of food.
Oh man.
So for every polar bear, these things are polar bear size. So for every polar bear, there's however big a home range. A creature like that would be 10 times as many. So that's just another. This might be another question for trying to predict behavior in extinct predator species. Is there a difference between other behavioral differences or anything that we only see nowadays with cold-blooded apex predators versus warm-blooded,
Hmm.
which is harder to say because you don't have as many cold-blooded apex predators anymore. Again, we're kind of fudging the details a bit with white sharks because they are preyed on by killer whales. And I guess the Nile crocodile, or so the Nile crocodile and the saltwater crocodile. They're fair to call be referred to as apex predators. So the salt I've never heard of an adult saltwater crocodile ever being hassled by a killer whale, then that's probably the only thing that could reasonably be a threat to a mature, like a 20-foot long, 18, 20 plus foot long armored monster. When they're even when they're small, the armor makes them that's not an easy thing for a shark to deal with.
Right. Yeah.
So there's more questions about awful animals.
So what's your favorite awful animal? I mean, as we kind of get close to wrapping this up, what would you say is your favorite through all time, all eras, all regions, all
So
environments?
this will have to be the plug for whichever is going to be our next talk. T-Rex.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, nothing is more quintessentially. So I'll list them as it's a one. Let's just say it's one of the top 5 greatest predators of all time. I'm not going to say it's the greatest because maybe there's something else that's significantly more badass. Humans are on that list. That's maybe a whole other video. But T-Rexes, they were the dominant land predator in a world of tanks adapted to deal with this thing. The next things like to say dominant land predator, that doesn't even come close to expressing how much they ran that freaking town at the end of Cretaceous, because the next biggest predator was tiny. It was like less than 1,000 pounds. So there's that they filled. So from all the different age groups that they were in, they filled everything from like 1,000 pounds up to 4 or 5 tons. So there were no other predators there at all that were in any meaningful way even close to competing. So imagine, I think the equivalent now would be like, imagine there are polar bears, and the next biggest thing is like an Arctic fox or a jackal-sized predator. Like there's something that could that's a good comparison. It's something that could reasonably there was nothing that was in any remote way any kind of a threat at all to an adult T-Rex. They show the characteristics of a lot of the characters you described. They absolutely had interspecies competition with other T-Rexes. Every big Tyrannosaur skeleton or particularly skull, like once it's like a fully grown adult, they've got bite marks from other T-Rexes. So that was definitely their primary competition was other Rexes. Fossil evidence, another thing we're seeing, then if most would have been fair to predict, but there's only recently been some consensus in the scientific community. There's evidence now that they lived in mixed age family groups, and the evidence for that is that there have been 3 separate fossil finds where there were like all within a short area, like within a 1 acre area or smaller. There was a fully grown adult or near fully grown adult, a silverback, if you will, T-Rex. Although trying to determine the sex of an extinct species is kind of hard, especially when they're egg layers. But we got the full grown adults. They found the full grown adults, the medium sized, the teenager ones that are more allosaur sized, and also tiny ones, like little ones. So you would never, it was a solitary animal, you would never expect to see a cluster of multiple individuals in the same age. You just wouldn't see that.
So they wouldn't coordinate and hunt and stuff.
Yeah. So, and fossil, it's so rare to find more than one predator at a site anyways. It's ludicrous to say, oh, it's just coincidence. The simplest answer is that there were apex predators that were looking after their young. And you can easily put 2 and 2 together. The oldest adults have bite marks on their faces from other tyrannosaurs. We see a lot of the youngest ones we found are in the presence of other old ones. It's fair to assume. I think that the next step is that it's fair to assume they were defending their young. So that's what we should call it right there, because I want to. Tyrannosaurs is a whole other pod.
We'll have to have a whole episode on that.
So those are two examples of the fossil record has sort of proven out two of these little features we see in predators. A large amount of the traumas or the threats we're experiencing as an apex predator is from members of our own species, and there's a need to protect your young. When you have the capacity, you no longer you have enough extra energy or extra time that looking after your offspring just makes sense. So that's things that we could expect to see, and the third one, the fact that the herbivores in your ecosystem, everything, the other largest creatures in your ecosystem, in your orbit, have to accommodate for you. And again, the why I think it's fair to consider tyrannosaurs. They're one of the top five, but really, it's they're also first among equals. If this was the top five, this is them. They're the strong one, because everything around them was like, you had the tankiest tanks in Earth's history. So the most flamboyantly, that has most flamboyant capacity for aggression in the Triceratops. You have the Euoplocephalus, and it's just and there's some of the largest, less tanky herbivores. The hadrosaurs, the so-called duck-billed dinosaurs. That's a really antiquated term. Everything is that's the focal point in the ecosystem. There is everything is accommodating to this to this friggin' dragon. So that's a thing we'd expect to see in predators. So I guess it didn't get around to addressing the fundamental question: how do we define the most successful predator, kill ratio, or survival rate? Tyrannosaurs survived as an apex predator for 15 million years. That's an insanely long amount of time for a predator. I think it's, at least among mammals, most genuses of predatory mammals, they exist for a few million years. It's like 5 tops or something, and then they go extinct, because when you're an apex predator, it's kind of an evolutionary bottleneck. It's like, hey, I'm running everything, but what do I do on these prey species that I'm adapted to dealing with? You're just less adaptable. So a lot of times that's a dead end for a group of animals, is that, hey, you're the top of the mountain, you're top of the food chain, but where can you go? Yeah. And how easy is it? Can you climb back down? So that's can you climb back down the trophic layers into being able to survive a big extinction event? So just another the vulnerability of apexhood. So tyrannosaurs did that for 5 million years. As far as what their kill ratio was, it's fair to. Okay, so I'm gonna stop on talking about tyrannosaurs, but that's they just for how long they survived, just for having 15 million years of dominance on land, that puts them ahead of, I can't think of any other group that has that. So I'd say logistically, for prey species, you're most concerned about how likely is it to kill you if it tries. For the predator itself is, but does that like, how long do I survive? How long do my children, my grandchildren, my great children, how long do I keep echoing to a time before, hey, our time has run out, our species is no longer there? So those are the two considerations for that one.
I think there's a lot of
so there's a couple.
Seems like it's quite relative, the apexness, is the thing I'm getting. It has to do with there's a lot of things that go into this idea, so it's not a universal necessarily. Anyway, well, do you want to wrap up for now? We'll save your T-Rex for another.
So let's wrap up save T-Rex. We'll save tyrannosaurs and humans for another set on like the apex predators that most need discussion are the two of us. humans are the T-Rex of the mammal world. That's
Yeah.
just that's just how it is. And I'll we can go to the, oh god, I'll have to I have the correcting voice in my head. I'll have to include something about orcas, but whatever. Orcas so far aren't eating humans. We can eat orcas if we want to. Eh, that's how it is. So the hypotheses we generate now are that there are certain characteristics you tend to see repeated in apex predators and apex prey, apex herbivores, and it'll be reasonable to just look at apex species, look what are the commonalities, and it would be worthwhile, I think, for as naturalists to be looking for or put some energy into looking for behaviors or adaptations that haven't been looked for yet, just because it's more likely you're going to see these behaviors in apex creatures. So look at white sharks and saltwater crocodiles, see if there's more elaborate parenting behavior, and that sort of thing. And then with look, and would there be a way to test that in extinct species, or would it be worth looking? Hey, did megalodon look after its young? Say, so nice. Almost less of a hypothesis and more of a filter. Like, hey, maybe we should try this filter for looking for behavior in apex species. So,
cool.
Good times, monsters,
good
dragons,
times,
humans.
And so my image of a shark fighting a lion, not so much. I guess the only place they could meet is like in some sort of what would you call it, estuarian little environment, swampy.
It would be a tiger, because it would
Yeah,
be in the
there you go.
Sundarbans.
Yeah.
It would be a tiger that's hunting in mangrove swamps, and the shark would be something big that can handle brackish water. So I don't know if
Right.
I believe bull sharks are found everywhere. So that would be the interaction.
About as close
I
as we get.
imagine would be about as close as we get between the two of them. Still scary. So I mean, tigers have to deal with saltwater crocodiles. That's absolutely a problem for them.
Yeah.
So
that's close. I'm reminded of an episode of Simpsons where they were talking about the food chain, and they showed a shark leaping out of the water, grabbing a gorilla off of the tree. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
One animal invariably eats another to survive.
It's a
Shark
dog
eating a
jumping up
gorilla.
to catch a frisbee, a gorilla reaching for a banana, and a shark is going, whack,
like the natural food web. Yeah. Anyway.
Make no
so
mistake,
shark
Timmy,
wins, I guess.
Make no mistake, Timmy. If a cow could, he'd eat you and everyone you love.
All right. Well, cool, man. That was awesome. That's interesting stuff. Scary. And we got to use the screen share. Hope people liked it. Let us know if you had any feedback on and more questions. That was really fun. So
definitely more questions. I feel we listed a bunch of examples, but there's a lot more meat on the bone there, pun intended. And we'll have to block out time for T-Rex and humans.
Totally. All right, man. Well, great to see you. Thanks again. Thanks for watching, folks, and talk to you next time.
Peace out.